Hello, everybody, and either welcome or welcome back to my podcast. As always, if you do like this, please rate, comment, and subscribe. You can find me on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, and YouTube. Man, so this has been one long week, no? I swear, there has been so much going on this week that it just feels like the beginning of this week was like a month ago. And yeah, so let's go ahead and start at the beginning of what I assure you was the beginning of this week, although it feels like it was ages ago. And that is with Josh Hawley's very awful, stupid, no good internet censorship bill, because there's really nothing else to call it. Although the name of the bill, in keeping with the tradition of naming congressional bills the exact opposite of the thing that they will do, is titled Ending Support for Internet Censorship Act. Now, I suppose it's worth pointing out that Hawley is a Republican, and the whole point of this bill was in response to people being deplatformed on social media, the alleged conservative purgings, and all of that good stuff. So he decides he's going to propose a bill, which I'm sure most of you can figure out the first problem with that off the rip. But the idea is that this bill would amend Section 230 to force platforms to be quote-unquote politically neutral. Now, here is the process for how that would go down. Every 2 years, and I'm not entirely sure how the initial process would be, if everybody would just get some kind of blanket immunity. I don't really understand how the initial process would work, but every 2 years, each platform would have to apply to the FTC, not the FCC, which is where I would think that this would be more rightfully adjudicated if you even supported adjudicating this kind of thing in the first place, which I don't. But you apply to the FTC every 2 years, and you have to prove through some methodology that is not entirely clear to anyone that your platform has been politically neutral and that it has not engaged in any kind of moderation intending to negatively impact a political party or have a disproportionate impact on the political atmosphere in general, I suppose. Like I said, it's very ambiguous as to how this would even, happen or work, but essentially, like I said, every 2 years, and this would be, I would assume, every platform that hosts third-party content, because that is who Section 230 applies to. So I would assume every social media company, all the way down to, I don't know how granular you would get with this. If you just had a blog and you had a comments post, if you too would have to apply every 2 years to prove that you are politically neutral in order to maintain your Section 230 safeties, because that is the carrot and stick here, is you have to apply every 2 years, and then the FTC does an audit of some sort. Like I said, I don't know how exactly you would even quantify such a thing, that a platform was politically neutral, but you apply, and then they do the audit, and then they decide, yes, you're good, and so you get to keep your Section 230 privileges for the next 2 years, or they decide, no, you have not been politically neutral, and then you lose your Section 230 immunity for what I would assume would be the span of 2 years. Okay, so I'm sure everybody can kind of see the first problem here, which is, at least to me, this is a big, huge, horking, glaring 1A violation, because it specifically says in the First Amendment, Congress shall make no law regarding the speech of people. This would be Congress making a law regarding the speech of people. So I don't even know how this would get off the ground in the first place. Second of all, I have been very vocal, and I'm sure it probably would have gone without saying anyway, that no, I do not support any kind of government intervention into the internet. I do not support any amendments to Section 230. FOSTA SESTA has done enough damage. We don't need to go any further. In fact, that needs to get rolled back. But the whole idea that this cockamamie idea would even be the purview of the federal government is absolutely fucking insane in the first place. Second of all, the sheer logistics. I don't even know how you would do this. Like, I don't know how a platform would even begin to comply with these sorts of requirements. I can give you my idea of how they would comply. And there seems to be two schools of thought on this. One school is that there would be the kind of environment that Section 230 was invented to circumvent, which is that the idea of Section 230 was to give platforms the ability to moderate content without being held liable as publishers. And the whole idea when Cox and Wyden, the two senators who initially proposed that amendment into what was at the time the Telecommunications Bill, was that there were two cases that this kind of centered around. There was Cubby versus CompuServe, and then there was Stratton Oakmont versus Prodigy. And without getting too far into the weeds in the difference between these two cases, Cubby versus CompuServe was ruled in favor of CompuServe because CompuServe did not edit or curate anything that was posted on any of their message boards or anything. It was just basically a free-for-all. Anybody could post anything. And so the court decided that because CompuServe did not curate their platform, that they could not be held liable for anything said on the platform. Now, on the other hand, Stratton Oakmont versus Prodigy did curate their platform, and they did it for a very specific reason, because they always advertised themselves as a more family-friendly option for internet access, that this is something that your kids could go on, and they weren't going to encounter adult material or certain content or anything like that, that they did curate the content. And so, if I remember correctly, they actually settled out of court on this, but the court had basically said that because Prodigy did curate their platform, that they could be held liable for anything on the platform because they were picking and choosing what would and would not be on the platform. So Cox and Wyden looked at that and they said, well, that's not fair. Prodigy's trying to create a specific experience through their product and their platform, and it's not fair for them to be held responsible in that way for trying to do that, for trying to make sure that the internet isn't like this wild, wild west where everything's just out there and anybody can be exposed to anything at any time. So that was the point of Section 230, was to allow platforms to moderate their content as they see fit without being held liable as publishers for what they do allow on the platform. So, with the removal of the Section 230 protections, things could go one of two different ways. Either one, you would have platforms offering the more kind of CompuServe, Wild Wild West, absolutely nothing is taken off ever experience, which I know a lot of this centers around political discussion, but I do imagine that platforms moderate all different kinds of content and probably take down a lot of content that most people would agree they would not want to see, say, on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, because maybe kids might run across it, or maybe it is truly offensive, or it is violent or pornographic or something like that. Stuff like that everybody could agree maybe should be curated. Or the other side, which is, this is what I think would happen, is that instead of sitting here and trying to bean count out, okay, did we allow the same amount of conservative thought as we did liberal thought? And I don't know where third parties would come down on this. I don't know where non-mainstream political thought would come down on this. But I can see, instead of sitting there and trying to parse out, okay, we let on this many tweets versus that many tweets, and we deplatformed 5 people on this side of the political spectrum, so we have to deplatform 5 people on that side of the political spectrum to make sure that we appear politically neutral. They'll just nuke everybody, and there will be no political speech allowed on platforms that allow for third-party content. Because to me, looking at this from a business perspective, that would be the easiest way to comply. Is just to be like, fuck it, you know what? We're not going to sit here and try to parse this out, so all political content shut down. We're not allowing any of it anymore. And in that way, we're politically neutral because, you know what? You're just not going to talk politics on our platform anymore. And I'm pretty sure I don't have to explain to anybody how horrible that would be for discourse in general, because I know I participate in political Twitter. I know how it gets. I know how ugly it can get. I know how people complain about this person getting deplatformed and that person getting deplatformed. I don't think anybody should be deplatformed. However, I do not think that any provider should lose their right to make that decision for their particular platform. Like, that's not for the federal government to decide for them. I personally think it's a bad idea, but that's their business, and they can do it however they want to do it. That's fine. Well, it's not fine, but you understand what I mean. So, this is just a horrible, 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 horrible idea that I don't see this coming to fruition. Like, I don't even really see this coming to a vote for the reasons that I've already put forth, mainly being that it's a 1A violation. So, even if this did somehow magically make it into being law, I don't see it actually passing any kind of court challenge. But like I said, I don't think it'll ever get that far, but just the fact that somebody in Congress thought it was a good idea to propose this legislation is a little frightening to me. That's a little fucking frightening, because that means that Congress is taking that one closer step to normalizing the idea that they have a rightful place in this discussion, and that they should be interfering in social media, and that they should be setting rules as to how people engage on social media. And it's not their place. It is not their purview. It is none of Congress's business or anybody in the federal government's business what is and is not said on social media or the internet in general. And I'm not super cool with people now, both on the right and on the left, normalizing the idea that it is. Like, that's not okay. That needs to be pushed back on. I agree that we need to sit down and think about what to do with social media. And I just did a whole interview with Art Tivana on this, so I'm not going to go like super into it because we kind of go into it on that episode. But as far as what I think the solutions should be and what the pitfalls are, and for what it's worth, he doesn't necessarily agree with me on social media. I view social media as a net positive sort of thing. He does not. That's cool. We're still friends. We can disagree on things in a civilized fashion, which is maybe a lesson that could be applied to social media writ large too, is that people can disagree in a civil fashion. And it doesn't need to be this whole thing that it is. And it's just, I've said it before, I've said it again. I think that the best solution for everybody is to stop expecting platforms to do your work for you. If you don't want to see certain content, don't see it. You can mute, you can block, you can just mute words from your timeline that will never ever show up. And I'm sure you can do the same thing on Facebook. Instagram, it's wholly dependent on who you follow as to what you see. So if you don't want to see somebody's content, just don't follow them. It's not that difficult. But I'm not okay with this idea that everybody seems to be turning to the platforms and asking them to fix their personal experience on social media, when it's your job and your responsibility to curate your experience on social media. And if you don't like it, then I either fix it or get off of it. Like, that's it. That's all I have left to say about that. So, moving on to what has pretty much blown every other story out of the water, which is the Iran situation. So, backing up, just in case everybody kind of missed this all started with something happening with some Japanese oil tankers. Now, I say something because it is varied depending on who you ask what the thing is that happened to the oil tankers. Something hit the oil tankers. Now, the company that owns the oil tankers say that it wasn't a missile. The U.S. has portrayed this as an Iranian attack on these oil tankers. Iran has said that they did not do that. It is all still very murky about who did what. I don't know if we'll ever really have an answer as to who did what to the oil tankers. But in general, the point is that none of this really needed to be the U.S.'s concern, because it wasn't any of our stuff. Like, it wasn't a U.S. company. They weren't in U.S. waters. I suppose it's always troublesome when something happens to an oil tanker, because, I mean, you know, we rely on oil, and if somebody did attack an oil tanker, that is worth talking about. But that whole situation was just everybody pointing fingers at everybody else. And for what it's worth, I mean, you had Bolton and Pompeo out here like 24 hours after the oil tanker attack saying it was Iran, they tried to blow it up. And it's like, oh, I'm sorry, do you know that for a fact? Or are you just trying to start shit with Iran? So, moving forward a bit. One of our drones was shot out of the sky by Iran. Whether this was in Iranian territory or international territory has been of dispute. Why it was shot down has been of dispute. So, anyway, what happened after that was, this was Friday night. Apparently, Trump okayed a military strike on, I believe it was 3 Iranian targets. So, he approves the strike. Everything's going forward. Everything's going according to plan. Like 10 minutes before the strike is set to launch, Trump calls off the strike. Okay. Don't get me wrong. I am glad that Trump called off the strike. I do not want to start a hot confrontation with Iran. That is literally the worst thing that could possibly be done right now, is starting another front in the Middle East. No, like, we need to start winding down, not ramping up. But, so, after that, the aftermath, obviously, first off, everybody was like, wait, what the fuck just happened? Like, we were going to attack Iran, and then he called it off, and then wait, what? And so, eventually, Trump does Trump tweets, and he said that he ordered the strike, and then was told that the casualty assessment would be 150 people. And then based on that he decided that this strike wasn't worth it just over a shot down drone. Like, it wasn't worth 150 people getting potentially killed. Okay, valid enough. But people started pointing out after he put out that explanation that when the president is given the information to say yes or no to a strike, part of that initial packet of information is the casualty assessment. So that should have been information that he would have had before ordering the strike. So this idea that he ordered it and then found out afterwards what the casualty assessment would be doesn't make any sense. Because, like I said, that's something that is part of the package that is given ahead of time before you initially approve or do not approve a strike. So, I'm sitting here now at this point, and I'm sure a lot of other people too, wondering, what the hell just really happened? Like, the only thing I can come up with, and this isn't very charitable to the president, and is rather fucking frightening if it's true, was that the whole thing was a bluff in the first place, which you do not play that game with military firepower. You don't bluff that shit, because if you screw up in the minutia, you start a hot war. Like, you don't fuck around with this. Like, this is not a game, especially not with Iran, especially not with a country that has been for decades chanting death to America and has been chomping at the bit to go to war with America. You don't do that. And just overall, you don't threaten military attacks in order to, I don't know, play chicken with somebody? Like, and that's the only thing I can figure, because maybe he didn't fully read the packet of information before approving the airstrike, which that's even worse. So, like, I would really like to know what happened between approving the strike, 10 minutes before the strike, and call off the strike. And for what it's worth, there has been rumors out of the White House that Bolton was pushing very, very, very hard for this Iran strike, which, surprise, surprise, I mean, there's a fucking shocker. I mean, dude's been wanting to go to Iran for probably as long as I've been alive. But I don't know. Like, what happened? Like, I think we really do need to know, like, what the hell just happened here, because that's scary. We were like 10 minutes away from starting a hot conflict with Iran. What? No, that's scary. Like, there's a lot of shit Trump does, and it's like, okay, this is stupid. This is just imbecilic. It's ridiculous. That's frightening. Like, that's legit frightening. And the reason why I bring up the idea of it being a bluff the whole time is because Trump is starting to develop this particularly nasty characteristic, and I pointed it out on the Mexican tariff situation, and on the next story that we'll talk about, we'll get there in a second, but there seems to be this tendency with him lately to threaten very bad things to a country that he wants to do a certain thing. Like, Mexican tariffs would be horrible for Mexico. Obviously, starting a hot conflict with Iran would not be very good for Iranians. And calling it back at the last minute for whatever reason. Either you got some kind of deal, or you think you got some kind of deal, but you really didn't. Or you think somebody's now going to come to the table and talk to you about their nuclear arsenal, or the nuclear arsenal that they're not supposed to have, but we all know they have. Let's keep it real. But this is not a very good way to handle things in a diplomatic fashion for two reasons. One, you scare the living shit out of people, and that's not okay. Two, there's only so many times you can play that game before people start calling your bluff. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen the next time Trump threatens to do some wild-ass crazy thing to a country, and that country's just like, what the fuck ever, you ain't doing shit. Because look at these other situations. You bluffed your way through that. You're not going to bluff your way through this one. So there's only so many times you can play that card. And God forbid we actually find ourselves in a situation where a threat is actually needed to be taken seriously, because at this point, I don't know how many countries are going to take any threat from Trump seriously. So I really think that the citizens in the U.S. and really around the world deserve some kind of explanation for what the hell just happened, so that at least we can know what the hell just happened. Like, maybe there is a perfectly legitimate reason for calling off the strike 10 minutes before you went forward with it. Like, maybe there is. Maybe, I hope there is. I hope there is some kind of piece of information that Trump got, and he was like, oh shit, maybe this is a bad idea, and hopefully that piece of information is not that, like, oh wait, I just now figured out that people wouldn't like it if I did that, which you should have known that to begin with. Like, I don't think anybody outside of, like, dumbass war hawks want to start another war anywhere in the Middle East anytime soon. I imagine that would not be very popular. But I would think you would know that before ordering a strike. I don't know. Anyway, maybe one day we'll get an explanation. Maybe not. All I know is the saving grace right now for Trump and the Trump administration is that he has the attention span of a 5-year-old. So hopefully, maybe this whole thing will blow over, because he's incapable of any kind of sustained action against anything. So I don't know. I'm hopeful on that level. That's a horrible thing to pin your hopes on, is that the president won't get bored with the idea of attacking Iran, so he won't do it. But that's where we're at. Like, that's where we're at, and it's frightening. Don't get me wrong, that is scary. But moving on to the last story that I want to cover, and keeping with the idea of the president bluffing his way through situations to try to get what he wants. The ICE roundup that was supposed to happen this weekend, and for what it's worth, I call it a roundup. I do not call it a raid. What was proposed, once you get past all of the bluster and everything, was not great either. Don't get me wrong. Like, this isn't super cool either, but apparently there were 150 families targeted for deportation, people who had already gotten their deportation orders, which that is a whole nother situation in and of itself, because people think, oh, these people got their deportation orders, they've already been through the court process, blah, 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 blah. It's not quite that simple, and it's not quite as cut and dried as people who don't really pay attention to what is going on with immigration think it is. There's a lot of fuckery, for lack of a better word, going on with immigration courts right now, especially as far as scheduling immigrants to be in their asylum hearings, moving dates around without telling people, people having dates but never getting told that they have dates, and so then they're getting these deportation orders in absentia. So there may be asylum seekers here right now who have deportation orders and don't even know it because they didn't even know that their court date had come and gone. So it's a very murky issue as far as that's concerned. But moving back to the ICE roundup that was supposed to happen this weekend. Now, there has been a bit of goalpost moving from the Trump administration as to who said what to who and when. Basically, they're trying to pin this on the acting director of ICE, saying that he or somebody else in ICE leaked information to the media about the impending raid. Or no, not the acting director of ICE, the acting director of DHS, which this is very hard to keep track of because everybody's an acting director now. Like, we have no actually Senate confirmed directors of anything. We just have acting directors. So basically, it's being portrayed in that way that it was DHS that did it. Now, let me tell you who really leaked the whole ICE plan for this weekend. It would be one President Donald Trump, because he tweeted out back on, I think it was Tuesday. It was either Tuesday or Wednesday that ICE was about to conduct this operation that, in his words, would deport millions of people, which is logistically impossible. Let's just put that out there. Like, as Trump portrayed it, it was logistically impossible what he was saying. But he put it out there on Twitter to his over 61 million followers that ICE was about to launch this program to round up people who already had their orders of deportation and deport them. So Trump leaked the ICE plan to the public. And then once Trump tweeted about it, of course, the media went digging, found sources, and started running with it. So, but of course, ICE can't come out and say that Trump fucked their plan up. And for what it's worth, this has just been a lovely, lovely chance to laugh at ICE, because this has basically just been ICE getting kicked in the nuts all damn week. And just a side note that doesn't have anything to do with this particular ICE story, but another great kicking ICE in the nuts story that came out this week is, I'm sure you guys remember from my interview with Matt Cameron, we were talking about how ICE was stationing themselves either inside or right outside of courthouses to try to nab people coming into court to do whatever court-related things that they needed to do, whether they were showing up for a court date or testifying or just trying to handle some business, whatever it was they were trying to do. They were basically hanging out inside and just outside of courts to try to pick these people up. And it has been ruled that they cannot do that. That ICE cannot basically use a courthouse as an entrapment. So that's another piece of good news on the anti-ICE front. But yeah, so okay, Trump tweets this out. It causes this whole panic in the immigrant community because a lot of things were misreported about how this was going to go down, who was going to be targeted, who wasn't going to be targeted. It caused this whole big scandal and drama and stress for these people, only to have yesterday Trump decided that ICE is not going to go through with this plan, which, by the way, for what it's worth, it's not really Trump's decision whether ICE does this or not, but okay, whatever. So Trump tweets out, okay, the ICE roundup is not going to happen this weekend, like we said it was. We're going to give Congress 2 weeks to try to work out some bullshit or another about closing asylum loopholes. It's like, dude, like, stop. Just, oh my God. If it was that easy that it could be done in 2 weeks, it would have been done years ago. Like, does he not remember the 6 months that he gave for DACA? Like, this isn't happening in 2 weeks. So anyway, this whole thing gets called off because obviously everybody knows about it now, and everybody had planned for it. Everybody had kind of their plans in place and stuff. And so it started being portrayed as, oh, we had to call it off because ICE agents were in danger, and oh my God, and they leaked to the press, and blah, 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 blah. It's like, no, you got called off because you got caught out there. So anyway, what is going to happen in the next 2 weeks? Again, I don't know, because the president has an attention span of a 5-year-old. So whether these roundups will happen in the next 2 weeks, I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Who knows? Who can tell? But the point is, this was a whole Trump-generated controversy that people are oddly trying to distance him from, which is funny. Because it's his fault. Like, he did this. But, yeah, we shall see what happens with that. But at this point, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up because I think I've gone on long enough. So, if you did make it this far, as always, thank you. And if you did like this, please rate, comment, and subscribe. You can find me on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, and YouTube. Take care, and until next time.